Those were the headlines, and we'll update you regarding the top story of this particular hour, that MQM founder Altaf Hussain has been reportedly arrested in London by the Scotland Yard. This is the breaking news coming in from London, where MQM founder Altaf Hussain has been arrested by Scotland Yard in an early morning raid today. And this particular arrest comes in connection with the case that relates to incitement to violence, a long pending case, over 3.5 years of investigation in this particular case. And we have once again been joined by our correspondent over there in London, Ollie Barrett. Ollie, thank you for joining again. So already you were telling that it varies, that how much time is basically required to frame the charges, and the trial, it takes the time for the trial that it takes after there had been the framing of the charges. So basically talking about this particular case, so what exactly the British law says, if once convicted the person, how much the punishment or the penalty do you think the British law actually gives the provision of?
Yeah, well, under British law, we are looking at hate speech carrying a maximum sentence of 7 years imprisonment or a fine, or actually both. Indeed, if we're looking at the 2006 Terrorism Act as well, encouragement of terrorism, incitement to terrorism, that's punishable by up to 7 years imprisonment. So certainly the allegations that police are investigating are serious under UK law. You were also mentioning there what we had been discussing about how long police can hold a suspect without charging with any crime. You can be held without charge for 14 days if you've been arrested under the Terrorism Act here in the UK. And we have had that confirmation from the Metropolitan Police that this is an investigation being led by the Metropolitan Police's Counter-Terrorism Command. As I was saying, it's an investigation that police say is focused on a speech from August 2016. The police statement saying this is an individual associated with the MQM movement in Pakistan, as well as other speeches, the statement goes on, previously broadcast by the same person. We were also discussing how the police statement here in London confirms that this is something that has been coordinated in terms of discussions with the Pakistani authorities. The statement from Police Scotland Yard saying officers have been liaising with Pakistani authorities in relation to our ongoing inquiries. And just to reiterate that police are saying in their statement here that the individual has been arrested in connection with an investigation into a number of speeches made by an individual associated with MQM in Pakistan. Police saying that the individual was arrested on suspicion of intentionally encouraging or assisting offences contrary to Section 44 of the Serious Crime Act 2007.
Ollie, hi, thanks for joining us. Usman Lone here. I was just wondering, the statement that you referred to from the British police, that was Scotland Yard's statement, if I'm not mistaken, and it was particularly for the charge of hate speech. Now, I know that once the police arrest an individual in the UK law then has to present, or the police has to present the CPS with that information, and then they decide the charge. Is that correct, Ollie?
Police are carrying out their investigations, and once they feel that they have got to a point where those investigations have completed as far as they can do so in the initial phase, then there would be a discussion with the Crown Prosecution Service about whether there is enough evidence to proceed with charges. So that you would assume would be something that is coming down the tracks, given that police are saying that they are searching those two properties. One, the address at which the man was arrested, and another, a commercial property in a similar area of London. Northwest London is what the police are describing at. So yes, it would be a final decision that would be made and announced by the Crown Prosecution Service if we do indeed get to that point that a charge is laid. And as I was saying earlier, if charges are forthcoming, then at that point we'd get a little bit more detail about what an individual was being charged with, and some more detail about that individual. We'd have a name confirmed, for example.
Now, Ollie, this man has always been no stranger to trouble. He was arrested in the UK in 2013 on money laundering charges and hate speech then. What seems to be the difference between that arrest and this arrest now?
Well, the difference is that specifically police are saying that this arrest relates to speeches of August 2016. So it is clearly an investigation that relates specifically to that period and those speeches and allegations of offences made at that time rather than anything that had come before. Very clear in this statement from the Metropolitan Police that it's focused on a speech broadcast in August 2016. That's what the statement says. So it's certainly moved on in terms of time from those previous investigations that you were mentioning there, and police are making it very clear in this statement, Scotland Yard, that this is related to a speech broadcast in August 2016.
And in August 2016, do we know what he specifically said for the police to trigger such a response and for the Pakistani government to trigger such a response to arrest him 3 years later?
Well, what police are saying at this point is that they are investigating this man on suspicion of intentionally encouraging or assisting offences with regards to counter-terrorism. As I say, the Metropolitan Police's Counter-Terrorism Command is leading this investigation. And it also talks, the investigation, about liaising with Pakistani authorities in relation to our ongoing inquiries. And the police are saying that the individual remains in custody at a South London police station. So clearly the questioning will be going on there. The searches of the properties continues as well. And that, in terms of detail, is really all that the police are giving us at this point. The police being pretty brief in terms of detail as to the circumstances surrounding the arrest of this individual at this address in northwest London. They do say, though, inquiries continue, and that feeds back to that idea that you were mentioning at the start about the involvement of the Crown Prosecution Service. The police will be gathering as much evidence as they possibly can before trying to get themselves to a point where either they decide that there is or isn't enough evidence to recommend that the Crown Prosecution Service bring charges.
Viewers at home, if you're just joining us now, we've got some breaking news that MQM leader Altaf Hussain has just been arrested in London, and we're joined by our correspondent in London, Ollie Barrett. Altaf formed the MQM movement in 1984, and he's had a bit of a troublesome life since then. He was arrested in 1986 for a political demonstration. In 1987 he was arrested again. In 1988 he won enough seats to be included in the ruling coalition party after a series of negotiations, but he lost power. I mean, this man has had 30 to 40 years of turbulence when it comes to Pakistani politics, and in 92 he was actually exiled, well, self-imposed exile to Britain, and 10 years later the British gave him citizenship. So now, Ollie, my question is to you is that he's obviously being arrested and charged as a British citizen. And does Pakistan have extradition laws with the UK set up in place for him to be extradited if he does get charged, or is this something that's going to have to discuss further down the line?
Well, we should say that he has not been charged at this point with any criminal offence. He's only been arrested, this man, on suspicion of a criminal offence. And according to the police statement that we have received, the offences do relate to British law. So you would expect in the initial circumstances at least that this is something that would proceed through the British courts related to the British legal system, and any charges would be processed here in the UK. But it is interesting to note that in the statement it does say that officers have been liaising with Pakistani authorities in relation to our ongoing inquiries. Exactly that liaison amounts to, we don't know. It could be the exchange of information, of course. You would expect that Pakistani authorities might want to see Altaf Hussain, if that is the individual involved, in Pakistan at some point to face potential charges there. But these specific allegations do appear to relate to offences under the British legal system.
Yeah, so he's been arrested and tried as a British citizen, as you were saying, Ollie. Another interesting part is, I mean, how a leader of a Pakistani political party can be in London enticing hate speeches. If you're not familiar with Altaf Hussain, he does these video calls or video conferences, and he does these Skype calls, and he talks to his people in Pakistan, in Karachi in particular, where the MQM stronghold is, about his feelings and emotions and his political motives in Pakistan. But what's interesting to see is how he runs this political party from the comfort of his home in North London, and now he's been arrested, it seems. Ollie, have you ever seen a case like this before, where a man in a different country is running a political party in a different country?
I think it's fair to say that this case and the case of Altaf Hussain, in terms of his role in MQM and how he's been involved in operations here, is pretty unique. I mean, there are, of course, huge expat and diaspora communities here in London from countries all around the world, and we've seen involvement in political process outside of the United Kingdom from the UK. That's not unique, but certainly the case of MQM and the circumstances of Altaf Hussain have been something that have seen a huge spotlight on him, on MQM, on London as a result over the years. The fact that his presence here has continued despite all of those, despite all of the involvement in the political process back home, is certainly something that is a pretty unique case in that regard, but not unique at all that you find people who have, for whatever reason, had to leave the political process in their own country, have come to the UK and have continued involvement from here.
Absolutely, you're definitely right. It is a unique case, and it seems Altaf is a unique person with the way he carries on and his kind of grandeur personality there. Ollie, so I mean, the last thing I wanted to brush up on was that he's been arrested. I know the police have made a statement now. Do you think that there's any concrete evidence towards this? I know we're all speculating at the moment, and there's a police statement, but I mean, the police wouldn't really arrest him if they didn't have any evidence to go by, would they?
Well, police will always say that they don't move to arrest someone unless they have grounds to do so, but clearly they have not only carried out the arrest, but are also carrying out these searches of these two properties in London, and they do say in this statement that inquiries continue. They describe their inquiries as ongoing. As I say, they've discussed the fact that they've been liaising with Pakistani authorities. You would expect that liaison continues at this point as well, but we should reiterate that fact that no one has been charged as a result of this arrest just yet, but clearly the offences that are suspected are serious offences under UK law, and it would be unlikely that the British police would move to arrest someone without having grounds to do so. That's certainly what they would say in a case like this, but as I say, no charges brought at this point yet. It may well be that the individual involved is released without charge. That would certainly not be without precedent here in the UK when it comes to counter-terror investigations. But yeah, police will be certainly of the view that they have moved because they had grounds to do so, but whether they have grounds to charge the individual very much remains to be seen. As we were discussing, that would be a conversation going on between the Crown Prosecution Service and the police here in the UK. But as I say, serious offences of which this individual is suspected on suspicion. The statement says of intentionally encouraging or assisting offences related to the Serious Crime Act of 2007 and focused on these speeches in August 2016. So serious potential offences. That's why we were discussing earlier the fact that these offences, if they became charges and if they became convictions, could lead to prison time.
Okay, Ollie, as we know, there had been an interesting fact related to this particular case. The Lahore High Court in Pakistan had banned the coverage of the speeches of Altaf Hussain when he delivered a couple of speeches in which he was seen as inciting violence. Later on, he appealed this particular verdict of Lahore High Court in the Supreme Court of Pakistan. Over there, his counsel, the late Asma Jahangir, had the version or the stance that it was the Lahore High Court decision violates freedom of expression, basic rights, and the Constitution of Pakistan. As we know, that Article 19 of the Constitution of Pakistan deals with the freedom of expression over here, but there are certain limitations. So Supreme Court of Pakistan upheld that earlier verdict by Lahore High Court as well. So what I want to know is that there are certain limitations to the Article 19 of the Constitution of Pakistan regarding the freedom of expression. How do the British law differentiates between the hate speech and freedom of expression?
Well, there are very strict laws here in the UK now with regards to hate speech. Of course, freedom of expression is a freedom that is also enshrined in British law, but hate speech has been something that British police have been trying to, and the British legal system, British politicians have been trying to clamp down on for a number of years. It has been much more strictly watched here in the UK. We have seen British hate preachers arrested at times. We have seen this something that successive governments have tried to make an issue that they get on top of. Any kind of incitement to terrorism or encouragement of terrorism very strictly managed through the British legal system as well. So certainly British politicians feel, in terms of the legislation that they have been putting together over recent years, that it's possible to differentiate between freedom of expression and something that is much more serious and much more damaging and dangerous. And so that's why we have the legislation in place here in Britain, and that's why police will have felt that they have been able to make this arrest, because that legal framework exists.
Yeah, you mentioned hate speech and hate preachers. I remember Abu Hamza, the Imam of Finsbury Mosque in London, who was also charged with this very same charge, and he got himself into a lot of hot water because of this charge, and I think he was jailed as well, Ollie. So we're looking at a similar charge now for Mr. Altaf Hussain. Am I correct in saying this, Ollie?
Well, the charges that we are looking at now, if they do become charges, as I say, no charges have been laid at this point, do appear to amount to the encouragement of perhaps terrorism offences. Hate speech would be wrapped up in all of that as well. We wouldn't get the detail from the police in terms of exactly what the charges are until charges are laid, but it does appear that these relate to this speech in August 2016 and previous broadcasts by the same person as well. And the fact that you have the Met's Counter-Terrorism Command leading this investigation would suggest that the kind of suspected offences police are looking into here do amount to that kind of hate speech that you are referring to, that kind of incitement towards terrorism. Certainly would that would be why we would see the Counter-Terrorism Command investigating here in London. But yeah, all of that is speculation at this point, so we do need to be a little bit careful in terms of where we're headed with all of this, because no individual has been charged at this point. We have just seen the arrest of a man on suspicion of a number of offences.
Thanks, Ollie. Ollie, do stay with us. If you're just joining us at home, ladies and gentlemen, we're breaking the news of Altaf Hussain being arrested in London. And I want to speak to my colleague also, Jawad, here. Your pictures now of Altaf Hussain's home in London being raided by police. Jawad, Altaf Hussain's a bit of a larger-than-life character. He does these rallies from his home in London, and he really gets the people going in Karachi. Some people are fed up of him, and some people love him. What do you think this man, what's so special about this man? How can he control a political party all the way from London in Pakistan?
Well, that's very interesting. As far as the history of MQM is concerned, it actually originated as a student union force back in Karachi University, and later on it picked up the pace, and it took a lot of people into its fold, because it was actually initially serving a certain quarter of the people over there in Karachi and in Sindh, particularly Karachi. So a lot of people came running into its fold, and later on we saw that as soon as it got power, so it turned into a sort of a party that believed in violence.
Student movement in the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So he took advantage of the students in Pakistan, in Karachi. I think it was formed in 1984 when he named it the Muhajir Qawmi Movement.
Yeah.
And then he renamed it to the Muttahida Qawmi Movement in 97, correct?
Yes, yeah.
So he's been running this party now for almost 30 or 35 years, it seems. And is he still the leader, even though he gets into so much trouble?
We have seen the disintegration of Muttahida Qawmi movement into a lot of splinters over the years. So obviously there had been a lot of difference of opinion on the policy matters, what Altaf Hussain actually wanted and what exactly the workers on the ground in Karachi and in Sindh wanted. So there had been a clash between the policy that Altaf Hussain was also pursuing. But on the contrary, we see a lot of high profile figures from within the party actually having a very different opinion of doing things in the political arena of Pakistan. So we saw that Altaf Hussain actually incited people to violence through his hate speech, that the way you already mentioned, that he used to come to the public through via a video call, or we had been seeing huge massive rallies in Karachi, and rather than directing that force towards a positive end, he was inciting them against the state, against the institutions in Pakistan. So Lahore High Court had to take the notice of this particular thing. So they banned the coverage of Altaf Hussain, and later on, this particular verdict of Lahore High Court was challenged in the Supreme Court as well on the basis of the Article 19, which relates to freedom of expression that I've already mentioned. But there are certain limitations. You can't say bad words about the institutions, which are very part and parcel of the existence of the country. So you have to have certain limitations, and freedom of expression, as our Article 19 enunciates, there are certain 4 to 5 different limitations. So there are certain red lines which can't be crossed.
Yeah.
So Lahore High Court gave that verdict and banned and directed PEMRA, the Pakistan Electronic Media Regulatory Authority, as well. So later on, this particular Lahore High Court verdict was challenged in Supreme Court as well. So the Supreme Court also upheld that earlier verdict of Lahore High Court.
But his party isn't banned in Pakistan.
His party isn't banned as of already.
He's still active, right?
His Muttahida Qawmi Movement Pakistan is active in Pakistan. Muttahida Qawmi Movement London is a different faction that actually pursues.
MQM. Yeah.
Yes. So that Muttahida Qawmi Movement London actually pursues the policy which Altaf Hussain actually comes up with.
Right.
But on the other side, we saw that Muttahida Qawmi Movement Pakistan, which was previously led by Farooq Sattar, so it separated itself after the hate speeches against the institutions in Pakistan were said by Altaf Hussain already.
Okay.
So this particular case actually relates to that particular event when he said bad words against the institutions of Pakistan.
We'll get back
so
to that.
The constitution doesn't allow at all. So there is a certain red line.
Right.
Yes.
So if you're just tuning in now, ladies and gentlemen, we have the breaking news of MQM leader Altaf Hussain being arrested in London. The Met Police, as you can see on the screen now, has released a statement that he has been arrested on the grounds of hate speech that he made in August 2016. And we've had Ollie Barra, also our correspondent in London, filling us in. Ollie, if you could just give us a quick wrap up of what the events have unfolded today in London, please, if you're there, Ollie.
Yeah, there was a raid that took place early this morning in London at an address in northwest London. We then got onto the police very quickly to ask if this had been a raid and an arrest that involved Altaf Hussain. The Metropolitan Police here in London, Scotland Yard, came back with a statement at that point to confirm that a man in his 60s had been arrested in connection with a number of speeches made by an individual associated with the MQM in Pakistan. Police saying that this arrest was made in northwest London and that it was made on suspicion of intentionally encouraging or assisting offences contrary to the Serious Crime Act of 2007. That man in his 60s has been taken to a police station in South London where he remains, and you would expect expect that questioning will be ongoing now, but not just the questioning. Police are searching 2 properties in northwest London. One is the address at which the man was arrested. The other is a separate commercial address, is how it's being described. We're also having it confirmed by the police that this is an investigation that's being led by the Metropolitan Police's Counter-Terrorism Command. The statement from Scotland Yard says it's focused on a speech broadcast in August 2016, as well as other speeches by the same person. And Metropolitan Police here in London confirming that they have been liaising with authorities in Pakistan with relation to these ongoing inquiries. We've mentioned the idea of extradition and how there is no extradition treaty between Britain and Pakistan, which would make it, were an extradition request to be forthcoming, less likely than in some other cases with countries where Britain does have an extradition treaty, that an extradition request could be carried out if an extradition request did happen. But it doesn't make it impossible. You can have extradition requests legally made by Pakistan. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that one could be made and one could be carried out, but it does make it much more complicated to get through the British legal system. Extradition treaties are in place for that very reason, to make it easier with countries that you do have an extradition treaty with to be happy with, in terms of the British legal system, that an individual can be extradited to another country. So, as I say, no confirmation yet that any such extradition request has been made or is going to be made, but it's not impossible that one could be, and it's not impossible that that could go through the British courts here. We were also discussing that difference between freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and the idea of hate speech, and exactly how British legislation has been working to clamp down on hate preachers, hate speech here in the UK. The Human Rights Act of 1998 does allow for the right to freedom of expression for everyone in the UK, but that same Human Rights Act of 1998 goes on that this freedom of expression may be subject to formalities, conditions, restrictions or penalties as are prescribed by law and are necessary in a democratic society. Well, the democratic representatives, the MPs and peers in this country, have decided that hate speech with regards to terrorism, inciting terrorism, encouraging terrorism, are exactly the kind of things that the legal system needs to take care of and needs to clamp down on and needs to have provisions for, despite those allowances for freedom of expression, those guarantees for freedom of expression under the British legal system.
Bharat, thank you so much for joining us there, and we'll keep you posted, viewers at home, how this story unfolds. That's Ollie, our correspondent in London. Now, if you're just tuning in, we've gone to the breaking news of Altaf Hussain, leader of the MQM party, being arrested in London today, this morning, and 2 of his properties being raided. One was his own residence and one a commercial property. We had Ollie telling us that the charges were on hate speech, and now the British police are interrogating him as we speak, and there'll be a further charge, if there is any charge, made by the Crown Prosecution Service. Now, if you're unaware who the MQM is and who Altaf Hussain is, I'm joined with my colleague here, Jawad Tehami. Jawad, tell us please the colourful life of Mr. Altaf Hussain and why he's in such hot water now.
Well, actually, it had been quite a notorious sort of character over the years. We have seen that he had to run away actually from Pakistan, and that particular fact that he had been running a political party from there and sitting in a different country and trying to influence the things over there at the ground in Karachi. So it was sort of a unique case for Pakistan as well, but already we've seen a lot of cases happening like this in history in different countries. So people running from their home country and taking refuge or asylum in a different country and running the political affairs and trying to influence the things there.
Oh, thank you for joining us. We'll be back after this short break.
Welcome back. And before the break, we were discussing the arrest of MQM founder in London today by Scotland Yard in connection with a case that relates to incitement to violence. We'll keep on updating regarding the development as it happens in the upcoming bulletins regarding this particular story. For now, we'll move on to some different stories. The US will send a special envoy to Sudan to avoid further violence. Tibor Nagy has been sent to mediate a settlement between the military and its civilian opposition. Talks collapsed last week when security forces stormed a sit-in of protesters in Khartoum. Hospitals in the capital say there were 70 rape cases following the attack on protesters. The Transitional Military Council says it will publish findings of the inquiry into the sit-in violence. The opposition alliance says it will name a civilian head for the Transitional Council. They say they will also nominate 8 other prominent members. The UN Security Council has extended its arms embargo on Libya for 1 more year. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged all the countries to implement the ban. In an appeal to the UN Council, Guterres said the arms prohibition is critical for safety of civilians. The UN has also extended an EU naval mission to inspect every ship entering and leaving Libyan waters for another year. The UN recognized Tripoli government has been at war with renegade military head Khalifa Haftar since early April. His forces began their military offensive to take Tripoli in early April. Clashes between the two sides receded during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, but have since intensified. 47 prisoners have been rescued from Taliban-run prisons by Afghan forces. Officials say the prisoners were freed from private jails in northern Baghlan and Kunduz provinces. Among the rescued captives were 17 civilians, 7 soldiers and 7 policemen. 3 intelligence officers were also released. A separate operation freed 13 people in Kunduz. A US airbase in Arizona has formally ended the training of Turkish pilots on F-35 fighter jets. This comes after Turkey rejected Washington's calls to cancel its purchase of Russian S-400 missile system. The US says Turkey's acquisition of Russia's S-400 system threatens the F-35 stealth fighters. Officials first reported a US decision to bar Turkish pilots from entering the country to train. Ankara blames the US for not taking up Turkey's idea to create a joint working group to defuse the tensions. Moving on to Syria, where at least 25 people have been killed in Idlib following the government and Russian airstrikes. Despite being a buffer zone, the rebel stronghold has recently come under heavy bombardment. Women and children are among at least 13 people killed after air raids struck Jabala village in the southern province. Russian warplanes have targeted other cities, including Hama, killing 12 others. Moscow and Syrian army has always denied indiscriminately bombing civilians. This is the 6th week of the Russian-led military offensive against the Idlib buffer zone. The UN says over 300,000 people have fled for safety of areas closer to Turkey. A Russian fighter jet has intercepted US and Swedish reconnaissance planes over the Baltic Sea. The aircraft approached Russian airspace during NATO's Baltop exercise, which Russia is monitoring. Russia says it intercepted 2 air targets over neutral waters of the Baltic Sea to prevent a border violation. Russian jets approached the aircraft at a safe distance and identified them as reconnaissance jets. Both planes were escorted out of the area. Yemen's Houthi rebels have launched a second day of drone strikes on Saudi Arabia's Jizan airbase. Saudi Arabia says it intercepted 2 Houthi drones targeting the airbase. The UAVs targeted a Khamis Mushait in the south of the kingdom without causing any damage or casualties. The attacks came as Saudi Arabia said its coalition is intensifying air raids on Houthi positions in northern Yemen. Earlier, Houthi rebels attacked the airport targeting a hangar containing Saudi military drone. North Korea has asked the United States to end its hostile policy towards Pyongyang on the first anniversary of the landmark summit between the US President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Pyongyang says the agreements made at the landmark Singapore summit could become redundant. Talks between the two countries broke down in February after the failure of the Hanoi summit. The countries were unable to find a way of slowly lifting sanctions in return for North Korea ending its nuclear program. South Korean President Moon Jae-in says talks between the two Koreas and between the North and the US will soon resume. The United States has warned additional tariffs on Chinese goods will be imposed after this month's G20 summit if a deal is not reached. President Donald Trump said disputes over Huawei can be addressed as part of a trade deal. He added tariffs would begin immediately if Chinese counterpart does not attend the meeting. The US president also criticized China for devaluing its currency. Trump said he will meet his Chinese counterpart at the Osaka summit. China has not confirmed a possible meeting between Trump and President Xi Jinping. At least 5 people have been killed and thousands stranded by torrential rain in central and southern China. 1.4 million people have been affected. The rains have caused losses to economy totaling $380 million. Officials said flooding has destroyed 10,800 hectares of crops in Jiangxi province. Rescue missions are underway to evacuate trapped residents. Heavy rains continue to sweep most parts of the region. Meteorologists are warning of an increased risk of landslides and flooding. Italy's coalition leaders say they will work together to avoid EU disciplinary action over its budget. In a coalition meeting, the government decided to cut taxes and raise workers' salaries in the next budget. Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte, League leader Matteo Salvini, and the Five-Star Movement's Luigi Di Maio met the economy minister. Di Maio said Rome wants dialogue with the EU without changing their position. Salvini says he is hopeful Italy will reach an accord with the EU over its €2.3 trillion debt. The European Union is expected to begin a disciplinary procedure against Italy today. 10 candidates have been formally shortlisted to replace Theresa May as Britain's next Prime Minister in the upcoming Conservative leadership election. Tory grandees announced the candidates after a meeting of the Backbench 1922 committee. The candidates include former Foreign Minister Boris Johnson, Jeremy Hunt, and Michael Gove. Former Minister Dominic Raab, Health Minister Matt Hancock, and Home Secretary Sajid Javid are also in the running. Rory Stewart, Ashton McVeigh, and Andrea Leadsom are among the others in the running. 313 Conservative MPs will vote in a series of ballots starting June the 13th. The vote then goes out to the wider Tory party membership, who will choose their next party leader. The race has been dominated by Britain's exit from the European Union on October the 31st. Brexit dominates the agenda as Conservative leadership hopefuls launch their final push for the UK's premiership. More in this report.
With the race to replace Theresa May officially on, campaigns are making a last dash with catchy slogans. Britain's Health Minister Matt Hancock has chosen to be the optimist in rather confusing pre-Brexit times. The Health Minister launched the campaign with the tagline, "Let's move forward."
About the future. And I'm an optimist about the future. I'm excited about what it holds. I believe the world is getting better. And I'm an optimist because I believe in people. I love people. This is one of the reasons I love my job running the NHS so much, because the amazing people who we work with.
Dominic Raab launched his campaign under the banner of building a fairer Britain. The hardline Brexiteer said he would rather leave the EU without a deal than delay the exit. He stressed that the UK must be clear that it was willing to walk away on WTO terms.
And the candidate who can be trusted to deliver on Brexit, and then unite our party behind an optimistic vision, fitting for our great country and worthy of our great people.
Michael Gove, however, hinted at delaying Brexit for a few days or weeks beyond the deadline.
And one of my concerns when I was out of government and on the backbenches was that we triggered Article 50 without a proper plan for Brexit. Well, I have a proper plan to deliver Brexit. I will ensure there is a full stop to the backstop. I will ensure that we negotiate a Canada-style free trade agreement with the European Union and new free trade deals across the globe.
Meanwhile, at number 10, May continues as the Prime Minister of Britain while the battle to take her job rages on. Her replacement is due to be in place by the end of July.
The 108th International Labour Conference is taking place in Geneva until the 21st of June. At the top of its agenda is the future of work with social justice for all. This year's session brings together over 5,000 delegates from 187 countries. ILO Chief Guy Ryder wants to promote pay equity, social partnership and end workplace harassment. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres and heads of state are attending the conference. This session will celebrate the International Labour Organization's centenary. Over 190 agreements and 200 recommendations have been agreed since it was founded in 1919. In Mali, at least 95 people have been killed in an attack on the ethnic Dogon village in central Sanga district. Officials suspect Fulani herders from neighboring Bankas district carry out the massacre. Fighting between Dogon hunters and Fulani herders has killed hundreds since January. In March, over 150 Fulanis were killed in one of the worst acts of violence in the West African country. The United Nations has warned that up to 2 million refugees could flee to Turkey if clashes worsen in northwestern Syria. The statement comes as aid funds run dangerously low in the war-stricken country. Air attacks and ground battles have already forced thousands of Syrians to leave their homes. The UN has expressed alarm over the deteriorating situation in Syria. It said a deal between Russia and Turkey to de-escalate the fighting is no longer effective. Canada has announced to ban some single-use plastics by early 2021. The move aims to reduce waste and litter and protect the world's oceans. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says that the products failing under the ban will be decided over scientific evidence. Earlier, Canada sponsored a G7 Oceans Plastics Charter intended to reduce plastic use. Canada's decision follows a similar ban by the European Union late last year. Greece's president has called for snap elections next month after dissolving the parliament. Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras had requested the president to dissolve the assembly after badly losing the European Parliament elections. Here are the details.
In the recent European elections, Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras' leftist Syriza party lost to its New Democracy opponents by 9.5 points. The Greek elections were originally scheduled for October. Now, Tsipras says a prolonged 4-month campaign could spell danger for the smooth running of the economy.
We have entered a virtuous circle which should not be disturbed for any reason, because that would mean that the sacrifices and the efforts of the Greek people would be in danger. Based on these facts and fully acknowledging this responsibility, I request that Parliament be dissolved and national elections be called.
Prime Minister Tsipras stormed Greek politics 6 years ago, promising to fight austerity. Recently, his ratings have been hit by a nepotism scandal and an unpopular deal normalizing relations with Macedonia.
And that's all for now. For further updates, stay tuned to Indus News.